Protestant nation. It was founded on the Protestant Reformation, and the Bible was our basic book. Out of the Bible came the establishment of our Constitution, even as the Dutch Republic established their Constitution. He would elect an absolute military dictator loyal to Rome in every nation. And he had done this in England by 1800 and in America by 1900. He then would start the Second 30 Years' War from 1914 to 1945. And some of the benefits would be the installation of Russia's Roman Catholic Grand Inquisitor. Yes, Stalin was a Catholic. He was trained by Jesuits at Tiflis Seminary. And he was a favorite of Cardinal Agagnian, who was the head of the KGB. The installation of Benito Mussolini, who was the one who restored the temporal power to the Pope to break up the Ottoman Empire so that they can start the whole scenario in the Middle East. And they did this all through Shriner Freemasonry. I also believe that they started the nuclear war hoax, and on that nuclear war hoax, namely airborne nuclear war, that they would use that as a basis for the Cold War. And with the Cold War, we would never interfere with all the communist advances being taken in Russia and China and so on. We go on a little bit more here, and we see that the nuclear war hoax would give birth to the Cold War. And this great deception would enable the Jesuit general to install dictators around the world who would be secretly or openly loyal to the Pope. He would accomplish this using his international intelligence community, the KGB in the East and the CIA in the West. They both worked together. And one of the major liaisons between the KGB and the CIA was James Jesus Angleton, that Knight of Malta and that slave of Cardinal Spellman. And then they would set up their Federal Reserve Bank. The Class A stockholders of the Federal Reserve Bank are Chase and Citibank. Both of those are run by the Knights of Malta. Martin F. Shea and Francis F. Stankard in the past. For 45 years, no nation would seriously interfere with the Pope's Cold War. By the time of its supposed termination in 1989, thereby enabling the Vatican's military-industrial complex to give high technology to Red China, the Jesuit general would achieve his goals, including the revival of the Pope's Holy Roman Empire, centered in a reunited Germany. And that's what he wants. World War II destroyed German Protestantism. It destroyed the most beautiful Protestant city in Germany called Dresden. It destroyed, which was a non-military target, it destroyed the most beautiful Protestant church in Germany called Church of Our Lady. So it was the utter annihilation of German Lutheranism.
Dresden, a once beautiful city filled with architecture and rich in culture. It was the most gorgeous city in Europe and also the capital of Saxony in Germany. But all of this changed in World War II.
The front was getting ever so closer to the once beautiful city, and many injured soldiers and refugees alike were being transported to the city.
The RAF
was bombing cities not just because they were industrialized, but also because they had a large civilian population.
As tensions grew during the war, the Allies were now starting to take drastic measures. Even before Dresden, the RAF was in charge of the bombing of German cities.
Commander-in-Chief at the time was Arthur Harris, who had made new techniques on how to bomb cities, which included phosphorus bombs and fire bombs, which could destroy a whole city in a matter of seconds. May 13th, 1945, the city of Dresden was just moments away from destruction. Minutes before bombs, many civilians were still celebrating Mardi Gras, but at 10:09 p.m., the bomb fell, killing thousands. But the real threat was still yet to come.
At 1:22 a.m., as the people crowded in the Grosser Garten, the Allies dropped their final bombs, which killed the rest of the survivors.
As the bombs fell, many civilians were either burnt to ashes or to just puddles. The less unfortunate were sucked into the firestorm, which tossed their bodies onto the streets and buildings while scorching them. Even after all of this destruction, they still found survivors, but they were scarred for life because of the gruesome deaths of their friends and beloved ones.
Such as tear gas. Some say that this is worse than the Holocaust, but that is still argued.
1745, als es die Frauenkirche traf. Dresden, Mahnmal des Terrors. Mit jeder Bombe, die Air Force war.
Then we go on down here. One of the major victories for the general would be the taking of Jerusalem by his Torah-despising Masonic Jewish Zionists. We must always separate Zionism from the Jewish people. I believe the Lord's beloved Jewish people have many promises yet to inherit, but the Zionists work for the Pope and they are Masonic. With every nation now subordinated to the temporal power of the Pope, the Holy Roman American Empire must now be destroyed. For it is the world's haven for heretics and liberals, quote unquote, condemned by the Jesuits in their evil Council of Trent. So why was President Kennedy killed? In following the lead of pro-communist Pope John the 23rd and his Second Vatican Council, he sought to end the Cold War, including the war in Vietnam. He also attempted to end the reign of the CIA, but as Pope John the 23rd died of a fast-growing cancer just like Jack Ruby, and was replaced with another Cold War president, was replaced by secret Cold War Pope Paul VI. Even so, Kennedy died and was replaced with another Cold War President Lyndon Johnson. Through these acts of defying the Pope's temporal power, the president became a usurper and a tyrant according to the Vatican's canon law, namely Thomas Aquinas, that has never changed. And I have a particular ex-Jesuit friend who's helped me research this, and he found a copy of Summa Theologica written in 1887, and he has a very quote for this. Through these acts of defying the Pope's temporal power, he became a usurper, and then Kennedy was assassinated by the Jesuit general's international intelligence community, domestically overseen by the American Pope, Francis Cardinal Spellman. Spellman was in control of the CIA through John McCone. John McCone was a Knight of Malta. Spellman was also in control of the FBI through his wonderful Shriner Freemason, J. Edgar Hoover. Okay, and J. Edgar Hoover, his third in command was Cartha D. DeLoach. Cartha D. DeLoach was a Knight of Malta. Both covered up evidence for the Kennedy assassination. Okay. The present Archbishop, Edward Cardinal Egan, will continue this great Jesuit cover-up, he having ignited America's present papal crusade against the Islamic peoples of the Middle East and Central Asia through the attack and demolition of the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, carried out by his loyal soldiers within the Central Intelligence Agency, including its CFR, CIA Director, and Knight of Malta, George J. Tenet. Yes, so George J. Tenet, a Knight of Malta, head of the CIA, helped to carry this out with the wonderful work of Michael Rupert that we've seen. Same way in Kennedy's day was John McCone that carried out the assassination, who was the head of the CIA. And with Tenet and the high-level Masonic Bush, House of Stewart, and the Bin Laden family dynasties tied together through the Carlyle Group, its CEO being another CIA, CFR member and Knight of Malta, Frank C. Carlucci. And Mr. Carlucci, one of his old wrestling buddies, was Mr. Rumsfeld of the Secretary of Defense. So they're good fascist buddies. Yet another act of bold high treason will result in the mass murder of millions of Muslims. Remember, this is not a war against terrorism. This is a war against the Muslim peoples. Osama bin Laden, Yasser Arafat, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Saddam Hussein are all Masonic brethren. They all work together. George Bush, Skull and Bones, his father, a Shriner of Freemasonry, his uncle, Prescott Bush Jr., a Knight of Malta. They all work together, and they're going to orchestrate through this war everything they want, and it's going to be to the destruction of the Muslim peoples, not those Muslims. Okay. I believe that this yet another act of bold high treason will result in this murder, the destruction of Mecca, Medina, and the Jerusalem mosques, including the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Remember, this is a war on the Muslim holy shrines because they destroyed the Protestant churches of Germany in World War II. They're going to get the Muslim shrines now. And it's also going to be for will successfully incite foreign and domestic Islamic fanatics to invade and destroy the white, apostate, heretic, and liberal peoples of post-Reformation America to the delight of the Black Pope. So what we have here in America is we have a Bible-rejecting nation. We can't have the Bible in public school anymore. And so as a result of that, our people now have departed from the Word of God. We've become a mixed people. We have no unity whatsoever among ourselves anymore. And so as a result of that, we will be easily conquered by a unified Muslim host, a unified Russian host, and a unified Chinese host. And we might as well include a unified Mexican host. They're all going to be coming up into our country in the future. Okay. Briefly, 5 empires. According to the book of Daniel, we are living, according to the book of Luke, during the times of the Gentiles. And Jerusalem shall be trodden down by the Gentiles till the times of the Gentiles be fulfilled. The Jews do not control Jerusalem. They have never controlled Jerusalem since 606, and they do not control it now. The people that control Jerusalem are the Masonic Jewish Zionists. Mr. Shimon Peres is a Mason. In fact, he was trained by Jesuits as a young man when he grew up in Poland. He's Jesuit trained. Now we understand why Shimon Peres deeded the old city of Jerusalem to the Vatican in September of 1993. Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, at this time was what we're concerned about. Rome, that's the Holy Roman Empire. Rome never ceased to be a political empire, but it got religion in 312, 313 with Constantine. Later on in 606, the spiritual power, universal spiritual power, was conferred on the Pope by Phocas, who was a dictator. And the temporal power was conferred 150 later by Pepin in 756. So these two powers are very key in understanding the papacy. Whenever you see the papal flag, you see two keys. One is a temporal power, the other is a spiritual power. The temporal power means that the Pope, the papal Caesar, has the right to rule every government of the world. Every one of them. That's why when the Pope gets off his airplane, the first thing he does, he gets down and he kisses the ground. It's not because he's glad to be here. It's not an act of obeisance. It's an act of claiming that it belongs to him. And the last kingdom will be after this, the Roman kingdom is destroyed with the return of the Lord Jesus Christ. He will establish his Messianic kingdom, which is what he came to do. He will institute his Davidic kingdom that he promised to the nation of Israel. He never came up to set the church up to begin with. He came to confirm the promises made unto the fathers according to Romans 15:8. And one of those promises is that they would have a land forever that had been promised to them to Abraham. Okay, next. The Coming Prince. The Coming Prince, I recommend for all your libraries. It is the explanation for the 70 weeks of Daniel. Okay. Written by Sir Robert Anderson. Go ahead. An English knight. And the knight. Okay, Jordan. Pardon my scribble. From the commandment to restore Jerusalem, which was in 445 BC, you'll find this in the book of Nehemiah, to Messiah the Prince, April 6, 32 AD, was exactly to the day 483 years, 69 weeks of years. After that period of time, Messiah was cut off, shortly cut off thereafter in 32 AD. 70 AD, Jerusalem and the temple were destroyed. Those two events, the cutting off of Messiah and the Jerusalem temple destroyed, are two events in between the 69th and 70th week. The 70th week will begin when the coming Roman Caesar, a coming Pope, will make a firm agreement with Israel for 7 years. Okay, next. Papal worship, another classic you need. It shows that Romanism and its doctrines and practice has nothing to do with true biblical Christianity, has nothing to do with the Word of God. Romanism has been the greatest persecutor of those of us who believe the Bible in history. In fact, my Protestant forefathers, the Dutch, used to have caps that they wore when they were warring against the papacy and Philip II. And on those caps they had a crescent on it, and it said rather Turkish than popish. Next. We've already seen that. We've already seen that. We've already seen that. Next one? Yes. Okay. We have the supremacy of the papal Roman Caesar in the Dark Ages. Take either date, whatever you want to start with, to 1517 AD. Then we have the Protestant Reformation, begins with Martin Luther, 1517 to the present. Supremacy of the Word of God over the supremacy of the Word of the priests. We have the Counter-Reformation. This is important to us because this is what the Jesuits started to destroy the Protestant Reformation. And the Reformation, you want to remember this. Regardless of your religious faith, the Reformation gave us three things: the freedom of speech, freedom of press, and freedom of worship. You have the right to choose what you want to believe about God. You have the right to choose what you want to write, providing you're going to assume responsibility for it. That freedom of conscience is imperative to have a prosperous civilization. So you take that freedom of conscience and you apply that to science, and now you can begin to develop new sciences. And that's why the Protestant West was the leader in developing culture and science. Okay. Now we have the New Age movement. The New Age movement is started by Father Jesuit Teilhard de Chardin, the father of the New Age. That is a stepping stone to the return of the Dark Ages with the supremacy of the Roman Caesar, and then ultimately the return of the Son of God to establish his millennial kingdom. Again, I mentioned the Pope's two keys. We have the universal spiritual power and his universal temporal power by Pepin. The meridian of that power was, I call, the demon Pope Innocent III, who murdered all the Albigenses and killed nearly all the Waldenses. He said, catch and kill those little foxes, and he sent out his French army to get them. The Company of Jesus is totally dedicated to the restoration of the papal Caesar's universal temporal power, founded upon his universal spiritual power. The risen papal Caesar intends to impose his temporal power over every nation on earth while ruling from Solomon's yet-to-be-rebuilt third temple in Jerusalem. That's what the Crusades were all about. That's what this present war is all about, the rebuilding of Solomon's temple. Okay? Okay. Yeah, next. Oh, you got that. Excuse me. Pardon me. Okay, who is the Pope? This is what he has said of himself. For the Pope holdeth place on earth, not simply of a man, but of the one true God. That's who he thinks he is. I have authority of the King of Kings. I am all in all and above all, so that God himself and I, the Vicar of God, have but one consistory. And I am able to do almost all that God can do. What therefore can you make of me but God? Papal Bull, Unum Sanctum. Pope Boniface. I refuse the Pope. We the popes hold upon this earth the place of God Almighty. Pope Leo XIII, 1894. Nothing has changed. Okay, next. This is the seal of the Jesuit general created by Ignatius Loyola himself, the founder of the Jesuits. On my book you'll see the points. There are 36 points on that book. If you add them up, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6, when you get to 36, when you add all 36 up together, you get 666. You get 666. Okay, next. Ignatius Loyola, again, IHS. The IHS stands for Isis, Horus, Seb. It is an Egyptian god worship. He's the father Jesuit general. He was a white Gentile. He was not a Jew. He was a house of Basque of Loyola, born into wealth and power. And he was also part of the Spanish Alumbrados, which today we know as the Illuminati. Okay. My first phase of the book, I give you this is a newer edition that I've added to this, but here is one of the quotes from Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, 1887. They, heretics, deserve not only to be separated from the church by excommunication, but also to be severed from the world by death. Much more reason is there for heretics, as soon as they are convicted of heresy, to be not only excommunicated, but even put to death. After the first and second admonition, if he, the heretic, is yet stubborn, the church, by excommunicating him and separating him from the church, delivers him to the secular tribunal to be exterminated thereby from the world by death. And that is exactly what Joseph Stalin did to millions of Orthodox Christians. That's exactly what Joseph Stalin did to many, many hundreds of thousands of Lutheran Germans when he sent them all to Siberia. This is a portion of the Jesuit oath, the fourth degree, and it is not the alleged Jesuit oath. It is the oath taken by Jesuits of the fourth vow, and that constitutes 2% of the order. And you have to be in the order for 31 years to be able to take this vow. I do further declare that I will help, assist, and advise all or any of His Holiness agents in any place, wherever I shall be, in Switzerland, Germany, Holland, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, England, Ireland, or America, or in any other kingdom or territory I shall come to, and do my uttermost to extirpate the heretical Protestants or liberals' doctrines and to destroy all their pretended powers, regal or otherwise. That's conspiracy. Next. Next. Furthermore, I promise and declare that I will, when opportunity presents, make and wage relentless war secretly or openly against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will neither spare age, sex, or condition, that I will hang, burn, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and bury alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, and crush their infants' heads against the walls in order to exterminate forever their execrable race. And when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poisoned cup, the strangulation cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of the honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or superior of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith of the Society of Jesus. We are going to understand lots of history from this paragraph. Next. What is a Protestant? A Protestant is someone who used to, not anymore, this is all taken over by high-level Shriner Freemasonry. I don't know of a Protestant church I'd want to go to. But a Protestant used to be someone who protested the papal power and who believed the Bible to be the final authority of faith and practice. These were deemed heretics by the Vatican and determined to be killed. The term liberal includes Roman Catholics who believe freedom of speech and freedom of the press, because there are some Catholics who believe that. There are some priests who believe that. And that's why Hitler's Nazi SS put about 2,500 Catholic priests to death, because those Catholic priests resisted the power of the Jesuits' SS. Okay, next. History of Romanism, I feel, is the greatest history ever written on it. It was written in 1845 by a great Berean pastor, John Dowling. Next. In this, he shows how he quotes in the Latin the destruction of the right to private judgment in reading the Scriptures. And the liberty of the press is forbidden. Sound familiar? Next. Again, we have the whole Latin quote. The above extracts from the decree need no comment. It is remembered that these prohibitions and penalty were enacted by the last General Council, which written in 1845 was Council of Trent. The Roman Church, they have never been repealed. The Pope today, whenever any Pope takes the oath of being a Pope, he swears to uphold the Council of Trent today. Next. The fourth session was the most important one, because in this fourth session, that's where they decreed that the Word of God was not the Word of God that I would believe, or most Bible believers, that being the Hebrew Masoretic text and the Greek Textus Receptus, or the Byzantine text. They said the Word of God is the Jerome's Latin Vulgate. Therefore, we have no common ground. Next. The fourth rule, the fourth congregation of the Index of Prohibited Books, enacted by the fourth session of Council of Trent, approved by Pope Pius VI in a bull issued on the 24th. Inasmuch it is manifest from experience that if the Holy Bible translated into the vulgar tongue be indiscriminately allowed to everyone, the temerity of men will cause more evil than good to arise from it. More evil is going to arise if we have the Bible in our own language. Yeah. And here, and he shall not receive absolution until he first deliver up the Bible. You can't read the Bible pursuant to the Council of Trent. Without the Bible, we have no Western civilization. We have no Constitution. Yes. This was taken from, in 1820 to 29 from a fantastic book called The Jesuit Conspiracy, written by Abate Leon. It's on my disc in the book. You can read the entire book. Dear brethren, the 6 assistants of the Jesuit general, our weapons are of quite different temper from those of the siegers of all ages, and it will not be difficult for us to maneuver as to render ourselves masters of all the powers already so much weakened. We fear no lack of soldiers, only let us apply ourselves to recruiting them from all ranks, from all nations, drilling them into punctual service. But let us, by the same time, be vigilant that no one may suspect our designs. You well know that what we aim is at the empire of the world. Written in 1848, published all throughout Europe, and was one of the impetuses that caused the Second French Revolution in 1848. Our Father General, as you know, governs Rome itself and the popedom. We make war at our pleasure, betwixt one prince and another, between a prince and his subjects, usurp dominion over cities and countries, fearing no discovery of our actions. Since our commerce is chiefly with great men, we know every public secret and can in a singular way dispatch, kill heretics and enemies of the Roman court. F. Doza. Aye, give me gold, plenty of gold, and then with such able heads and such resources as the church commands, I will undertake not only to master the whole world, but to reconstruct it entirely. Remember the Reconstruction? The American Reconstruction? Now we're having a reconstruction amongst the Islamic nations. Next. Successful in her assaults upon this country, she may put the world back again into the darkness of the Middle Ages. This, our country, has been used as the greatest tool of the papacy to create the New World Order. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. The Vatican has ruled our country, lock, stock, and barrel, at least since the days of Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders, until they put that Freemason in office after they assassinated McKinley. Every war we've been in since the Spanish-American War has been a Vatican war. Everyone. We all think we're patriots. I'm going overseas to Germany. My buddies are going to Nam. All for the Pope. Early in January, communism is an enemy. We are all against it. But we have another enemy also, older, shrewder. It is Roman Catholicism and its bid for world power. In the United States, it is Spellmanism. Cardinal Francis Spellman was the most powerful churchman up to his day that ever lived in the United States. Spellman was FDR's intelligence liaison overseas. He carried all his intelligence messages. He worked intimately with the OSS and Wild Bill Donovan, and Wild Bill Donovan was Irish Roman Catholic, you guessed it, Knight of Malta. St. Bartholomew's Massacre in 1572. This is when the Jesuits organized the attempted annihilation of all the French Huguenots or the French Protestants, first out of Paris and then ultimately out of France with the revocation of the Edict of Nantes in 1685. Next. Henry Garnet, the Jesuit who was one behind the gunpowder plot with 36 barrels of gunpowder in England. They tried to blow up the king and the Parliament. It was discovered. Guy Fawkes was put to death, and this was the Jesuit behind it, and here's what he said. "O God, destroy this perfidious nation. Extirpate from the earth those who live in it, to the end that we may joyfully enter into Jesus Christ, the Pope," because he claims to be Jesus Christ, "the praises that are due unto him." This is the kind of fanaticism that a Jesuit of the fourth vow has. The death of Gustavus Adolphus at Lutzen, 1594 to 1632. He was known as the Snow King and the great Lutheran hero. And here's what he said as he died. "Here he is dying, giving his last full measure for Protestant liberty, declaring to his killers, 'I am the King of Sweden, and thus I seal with my blood the religion and liberties of Germany.' Our hero's modest life and noble death furthered the Reformation that brought about the modern era with the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. Any historian will tell you that the modern era began in 1648. The Dark Ages ended and the modern era began then. That's when science flourishes and we begin to build civilization. Japan, this is the most horrible story. The Jesuits came into Japan, they sought to conquer Japan. After conquering Japan, they sought to conquer China. Well, the Japanese got wise to them. They suppressed them and expelled them in 1614. In 1622, they hung many Jesuit traitors, and righteously so. Here's Matthew Rickey conquering China for the Pope in 1605 with IHS. He did not succeed. Next. We're going to jump 200 years in the future. We're going to look at these two men here. This is Albert Fall, and this is Knight of Malta, Edward Dehaney. Albert Fall was the Secretary of Interior. He made a secret deal with Dehaney because Dehaney was an oil man, and Edward Dehaney was far richer than John D. Rockefeller. When was the last time we ever heard of Edward Dehaney? Okay? This evil and calculating man bribed his old friend Albert Fall into leasing Navy oil land in Elk Hills, California, which oil netted him $100 million in gold. Dehaney then built Navy fuel storage tanks at Pearl Harbor in the name of national security. This is in the 20s, folks. When did the Japanese attack? 41. They're planning in the 20s for a Japanese attack. Okay? And Dehaney talks about this Mongol invasion. Fall was convicted of taking a bribe from Dehaney, but after 4 court battles, Papal Knight Edward Dehaney was found innocent of giving the very same sinister bribe that Fall had been sent to prison for receiving. That shows how they controlled the courts. Now the Company of Jesus could incite a Japanese attack using FDR and Hirohito to wage war against the anti-Jesuit Japanese people. Hirohito and FDR worked together. I had an old missionary Japanese friend, Daniel Fuji. He said we couldn't stand Hirohito. He lied to us. Here's a Japanese trader. This is an admiral of the Japanese fleet that attacked Pearl Harbor. Having been exhorted by the orders of Emperor Hirohito and Admiral Isoro Yamamoto, educated at Harvard, that the fate of the Japanese Empire will depend on this issue of this battle, this shameless traitor refused to order a 3rd airborne attack wave at Pearl Harbor, sparing essential targets including ship repair and fuel storage facilities. The harbor's above-ground fuel tanks built by Knight of Malta Edward Dehaney in preparation for the Pacific War were filled to capacity with 4.5 million barrels of oil and remained untouched. According to Admiral Husband E. Kimmel, if the oil tanks had been destroyed, the Pacific Fleet would have been forced to wage a 4,000-mile war from the distant California coast, as there was no fuel available anywhere else in the Pacific. The Battle of Midway would never have taken place, during which Japan lost half of its fleet. Since the purpose of the Black Post attack on Pearl Harbor was merely to incite 14th Amendment America to declare war on Japan, Nagumo's attack was never intended by the Japanese High Command under Jesuit control to destroy the base. As a result, the fate of the Japanese Empire was sealed. Japanese treason, American treason, Dwight Eisenhower being the most disgusting American general traitor who probably ever drew a breath. Irish Massacre, 1642, is when the Jesuits motivated the Irish to kill their own people. Next. My ex-Jesuit advisor taught me this one, and I was shocked to hear it, and he wrote it himself. During this is the second Irish Massacre, from 1845 to 1850. We're all taught it's the Irish potato famine, aren't we? What nonsense. During this 5-year period that with Queen Victoria sitting on the British throne, Jesuit-controlled, the whole House of Hanover was Jesuit-controlled since George III, the royal butcheress of Ireland, who managed to raise her infamous son, Jack the Ripper, closely attended by her Jesuit advisors, freighters laden with Irish meats, vegetables, etc., were departing Irish ports en route to other countries at the rate of about 7 freighters per day. The Jesuits in control of Victoria were starving Ireland. In the night, while nearly 1 million of my Irish ancestors were starving to death. In the 1930s, the company would cause Stalin's massacre of the Orthodox Ukrainians and the so-called famine in the Ukraine, ordering Stalin to lock up all the food as millions perished. In addition to producing another Vatican harvest, the Irish Protestant body count, the ensuing increased Irish immigration provided the Jesuits with a stepped-up flow of Irish Catholics to the United States to help build within that Protestant nation a blindly obedient papal fifth column as an instrument for destroying American constitutional self-government. It worked. In the 1960s, the Jesuits would cause the forced mass immigration of North Vietnamese Catholics to South Vietnam by using Ho Chi Minh, who had a Catholic advisor as a bishop advisor, to spread the rumor that his communists were going to kill all the Catholics in North Vietnam. The U.S. Navy, controlled by Cardinal Spellman's Francis Matthews, who was the head of the Knights of Columbus at the time, provided the vessels for that movement. Next. Oliver Cromwell. Oliver Cromwell that overcame the machinations of the Jesuit order and saved Protestant England. Next. Pierre Lachaise, the Jesuit confessor of King Louis XIV, who was the one behind the revocation of the Edict of Nantes. It had become evident that Louis XIV had seduced his daughter-in-law, and in order for him to get forgiveness for that sin, he had to revoke the Edict of Nantes, which granted religious freedom in France. And so that is what.
So you may have heard of the secret oath of the Jesuits. I looked into that, and what I found is this book called the Monita Secreta. It's on openlibrary.org, and it was written by an ex-Jesuit, and it was published originally in the year 1723. And I didn't read the whole thing, but I just skipped through it, and so I just want to share a few things here. If you want to look more closely into it, I'll leave the link below. So it says the greatest possible care must be taken that these instructions do not fall into the hands of strangers. But if this should happen, let it be denied that these are the principles of the society, and let such denial be confirmed by those of our members whom we are sure know nothing of them. So it's saying there are some people within the order itself who don't know the ultimate agenda, which makes sense because we know a lot of organizations do that, a lot of secret societies do that. Chapter 1, it says, in order to render itself acceptable to the inhabitants of a place, the object of the society will be of great service. It is necessary to discharge the most humble duties in hospitals, to visit the poor and the afflicted and prisoners, that the principal inhabitants may be led to admire and love our people. So I'm just going to skim through what I've highlighted in here. And then it says, and cause them to be more liberal towards us. And then it says, all must learn the same outward manner. Be cautious in buying land. Let this be done in the names of some trusty and secret friends. Let the purchases which are adjacent to our colleges be assigned to colleges at a distance, by which means it will be impossible that princes or magistrates can ever have certain knowledge of the revenue of the society. So, I mean, they're trying to hide their revenue. And then it says, let the greatest amount be always extorted from widows. And let what is contained in the Roman treasury be kept secret. And this reminded me of Matthew 23, where it says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. And make long prayer for a pretense. I mean, that sounds to me like most of the church leaders that are in existence now. I mean, there's probably a few that are truly sincere, but most that I've seen, they all use the same vocal inflections while they're doing it. So I mean, you can tell that they are reciting these prayers just to conform to a community. And it actually says that right here in verse 5 of Matthew 23. But all their works they do is to be seen by men. In other words, they're just doing it to be accepted by other people. It says they love the uppermost rooms at feasts and the chief seats in the synagogues and greetings in the markets, and to be called of men, Rabbi, Rabbi. But Jesus says, do not be called Rabbi, because all of you are brethren. And do not call any human father. Your Father is in heaven. Neither be called masters. He that is greatest among you shall be your servant. And then again he says, woe unto you, hypocrites, for you devour widows' houses. And then Isaiah 10 also talks about this. It says, woe to them that decree unrighteous decrees, and that write grievousness which they have prescribed, that widows may be their prey. And then it says, without me they shall bow under the prisoners, and they shall fall under their slain. Because of course all throughout the biblical text it says, okay, their judgment is coming. And so this 18th century book right here, supposedly translated from the Jesuit secrets themselves, from an ex-Jesuit, says that the greatest amount should always be extorted from widows, and let what is contained in the Roman treasury be kept secret. Okay, well, everybody knows that the Roman treasury is filthy rich now. That's not a secret anymore. And we know the Jesuits vow their allegiance to the Pope above all. So their success at gathering wealth, which is what that book was talking about, is pretty much evident at this point. It's not a secret anymore, although they originally said they were trying to keep it secret several hundred years ago. I mean, this is the crown of jewels. Apparently, it has sapphires, rubies, emeralds, and other gems covering it. Their robes, we know, are made of fine silk and linen, or fine linen and silk. And I'm not an expert on this, but in just a short search, I found at least 3 different thrones that the popes sit on, which I don't know why anybody needs to sit on a throne. I'm 100% certain that Jesus would not be sitting on a throne while people are lying in the street homeless and starving to death. I mean, and a true representative of Jesus wouldn't do that either. I think we pretty much all can see that, I mean, at this point. And so the agenda that the Jesuits had in this book, clearly they have been successful at that, because their agenda was to acquire as much wealth as possible for the church, and to do it at any means necessary. And so it's clear that they were successful at that they acquired their wealth and their status. Very successful at that. So, and this pretty much explains that they used really evil means of doing that. And then it says here in chapter 2, every means must be employed at the beginning that we may gain the ears and minds of princes and leading men, so that there may not be any who may dare to rise against us. And then it says their evil deeds, interpret them favorably under the pretext that is for the common good. Not only that, it says right here, if the prince begins to do anything that's not acceptable, he must be encouraged and urged on. And it says here, those who are of great authority in the state, they must be used in subduing and restraining the sort of people who are oppressed to our society. So they're going to use the government to get rid of their enemies, or which are probably the good people in the world, the people that don't want to be part of it. And then it says, let our people so direct princes and illustrious men that they may appear to aim only at the greater glory of God, for their aim must not immediately, but gradually be directed to political and secular dominion. So very slowly over time, they're saying they want to take over the governments, basically. And then here, this is another one that's especially bad. It says, greater efforts must be made against those who attempt to set up schools for the education of youth. Let it be shown to princes and magistrates that these people will cause disturbance unless they are prevented. It's talking about people that just want to help children. They're to be demonized. And then it says here, concerning winning over rich widows to the society, it says that down here, they're going to do all these things that they may be more easily withdrawn from the conversation of visits and suitors. So they want these widows to remain lonely so they can take all their wealth and property. And then it talks about in what manner widows are to be secured and their property disposed of. So this pretty much explains why Jesus kept talking about widows all the time, saying those who, devour widows' houses. This is it right here. And then it says here, let the mothers be instructed to annoy their children even from infancy with reproofs, castigations, etc. And especially when daughters are grown up, let them be refused ornaments and apparel suitable to them. Then it talks about how they increase their revenue by accentuating those who are poor within their community, but keeping secret those who are wealthy. And I mean, that just shows you that they don't even take care of their own. They simply use their destitute to advance their own agenda. And then it says it's necessary to dismiss as an enemy whoever has alienated those who are devoted to the church or persuaded any rich person or any person well disposed to leave. And also it's necessary to dismiss those who show greater affection for their relatives when disposing of their property. So if someone wants to leave their house to their child, for example, then this society will not accept them and dismiss them as an enemy for simply wanting to give their own property to their children. And personally, when I was looking at this, the first thing I thought of was that this is the binding of the tares right here, because obviously they're taking in people that are really evil and making enemies of those that are actually good people. And I mean, it just immediately reminded me of Matthew 13, which says, gather first the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them. In other words, bind them in bundles in order to burn them. I mean, that's symbolic, but we know these texts are telling us a nuclear event is coming. That's the burning. And a great multitude will be saved from that, a multitude that can't be counted. But before that, the tares, the bad seed, will be bound together in bundles. So, I mean, that's just what this seems like to me. Because if you continue reading this, you'll see they're dismissing good people and keeping the bad. So they dismiss those who care for their relatives right here. And then not only that, they actually harass those people. It says, okay, those people that care about their relatives, we're going to dismiss them, but that they may not afterwards complain of the cause of their dismissal, which was that they cared for their own family, then let them not be dismissed immediately. Instead, let them be harassed with chapters and public censures, and let them be restrained from recreation and conversation with strangers. Let them be deprived until they are driven to murmuring, and then let them be dismissed as persons pernicious to others by bad example. And then it goes on, it says they will also do this kind of thing to those who know their secrets. First, let them be persuaded to promise in writing that they will never write or speak anything injurious to the society, but at the same time let the superiors preserve in writing their evil inclinations, failings, and vices, which they themselves have at some time given according to the custom of the society. So it's talking about their confessions right there. Their Catholic confessions will be used against them. Then it says, this is what's done to those who simply know their secrets and are dismissed. I mean, they might not even tell anyone the secrets their whole life, but just because they know some of the secrets, this is what is done to them. It says they are discredited and harassed simply because somebody suspected that they might tell the secrets later, not because they actually did anything. And by the way, this is still happening in our own day and age. I've been talking about that. I just uploaded a video on it. It's called organized stalking and harassment. So this is still going on. So I'll try to remember to link that below, that video, if you're interested in that. And then it says right here outright what they're doing is suppression. So let me just read through here. It says it must be contrived that we may keep up an intimate correspondence with someone in the family in which the dismissed reside, and as soon as anything is discovered blamable or deserving of censure, let it be spread amongst the common people by means of persons of inferior degree who are attached to us. So we're going to have somebody from the church spy on them, hopefully somebody in their own family. But if not, they're probably going to use somebody else. And if something bad is discovered, we're gonna tell everybody in the community. And then it says, but if they commit nothing worthy of censure and conduct themselves in a praiseworthy manner, then let their virtues and actions, which are deserving of commendation, be depreciated by subtle insinuations and doubtful expressions until the esteem and confidence which is attached to them is diminished. So basically, if you can't find anything bad on them, just make it up. Just imply that they're doing bad things. And then it just outright admits that it's suppression, that's what they're doing. Okay. And then it talks about recruiting the men, let them associate with us, taking care that familiarity does not produce contempt. Well, I mean, why would it produce contempt unless they knew that what they were doing was bad? And then I'm just going to go through the headings of these chapters right here. You can read it later if you want to. And then it says, showing publicly a contempt for riches. So even though they're trying to gather wealth, they want everybody else to think, oh, they're not interested in that. And it says it will be necessary to act more here's a good one. After they manipulate the wealth out of those widows, it says it's necessary to be more resolute, to act more resolutely and sternly with widows and other persons who have given most of their property to the society. So basically manipulate them into giving all their wealth and then treat them badly after that. And they talk about their methods of advancing the society. And then this at the end talks about the vows that their members take. I thought it was sort of strange how it says peculiar care in the education of boys. I'm not sure what that means. Then they promise special obedience to the Pope, blindly following whatever they're told to do by their superior, who they believe holds the place of Christ. And in this one, this person is vowing to depose and kill all the kings and princes who don't believe in their ideology. So that's pretty much it. We all know Pope Francis is the first Jesuit pope. So we're just, there it is. That's what the Jesuit agenda was hundreds of years ago. At least part of it. And we've had ex-Jesuits come out recently and say that they were instructed to infiltrate Christian churches. So that's part of their agenda as well. Okay, I'm going to stop this video now.
Hi, this is Veritas Equitas. What I have on the screen is a declassified National Archives file containing the interrogation of Nazi intelligence general Walter Schellenberg. Schellenberg was the head of foreign intelligence for the Nazis. Before getting into this report, it's important to note that Schellenberg himself said this: "The SS had been organized by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuit order. The rules and service and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius de Loyola constituted a model which Himmler strove carefully to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Every order had to be executed without comment." And this is in Edmund Paris's book, The Vatican Against Europe, and he quotes that out of Le Chef du Contre-Espionnage Nazi Parley. Right there. Schellenberg was also protected by Sir Stuart Menzies, who, according to the military intelligence writer John Loftus, ordered British troops to bring truckloads of Nazi treasure to the Vatican, and also according to Loftus, Menzies allowed Kim Philby to recruit ex-Nazis and escort them secretly through the Vatican to South America. And this is a quote by John Loftus out of his book, Secret War Against the Jews. "It was Menzies who ordered British troops to help the Vatican truck the Nazi treasure into hiding. It was Menzies who gave Nazi intelligence chief Walter Schellenberg and other Nazi negotiators sanctuary in Britain after the war. Menzies also authorized Kim Philby to recruit ex-Nazis as agents and smuggle them through the Vatican to South America." Well, what is revealed by Schellenberg in his interrogation report is a fact proving the preeminent intelligence gathering of the Jesuit order, specifically concerning Nazi intelligence. This is a vital detail that I don't believe has ever been revealed before in the anti-Jesuit, anti-Vatican movement. So on page 24, let me navigate to page 24. Okay, page 24. This gives the details of a Polish spy codenamed Kunsewinks, along with two other Poles working jointly for Poland and for the Japanese. Kunsewinks was arrested in the Berlin Tiergarten at the very moment when he handed to the cook, who was also another spy, a parcel which he had brought with him from Warsaw. The chief of the Polish desk of Abteilung III of the RSHA was then Kubicki, who collaborated with Rolander, who then worked in 3F of Canaris's Abwehr. The parcel which Kunselwings had handed to the cook, who had received it on behalf of the Japanese, contained toothpaste and a clothes brush, which in turn contained microphotographs embracing the whole of a German invasion preparations against Russia. These photographs, when enlarged, later filled not less than 3 volumes. They had been made by the Polish professor in Warsaw. And if we scroll up, we see who this guy Kunselwings was answering to, who his masters were. At the start of the section here, it says, Schellenberg gave a detailed account of the case concerning the Pole, Kunselwings, who with 2 other Poles worked against the Russians for the Japanese, and provided their taskmasters with the complete German invasion plan against Russia. Kunselwings' lines led to the Polish Major Peter in Stockholm, who worked for the Japanese military attaché there called Ondera, and to the Jesuit General Ledowski in Rome. So the Jesuit general had access down to the smallest detail of the whole plan of the German invasion of Russia. This was in 1941 when Kunselwings was arrested, and the book Target Corinth Canal by Platon Alexandes shows that Schellenberg convinced Kunselwings to work for German intelligence after his arrest. It says here, Schellenberg claimed to have convinced him to work for German intelligence in Russia and thereby saved his life, though he lost trace of him in 1945. But in my estimation, this Kunselwings, since he was working for the Japanese, who were allied with the Nazis at the time, was already working for the Nazis, and his arrest was the result of lower level guys catching him who weren't privy to the plans to share this intelligence. And to drive that home, Gerald Posner, who's a best-selling New York Times author and a Pulitzer Prize nominee, he wrote in his books God's Bankers, he wrote in God's Bankers that this was a German spy. Let me get the exact quote for you here. Okay, this is on page 533 in the notes section of God's Bankers, citation 97. It says, quote, German intelligence managed to place an agent in Ledowski's inner circle. See report of interrogation on Walter Schellenberg. So, that aligns with my contention that Kunselwings was already working for the Nazis to give intelligence to the Jesuit general. Just to be comprehensive, here's some other sources that write about Ledowski receiving the German invasion plans of Russia. This is from Hitler's Last Chief of Foreign Intelligence by Reinhard R. Dories. It says in Stockholm it was delivered to the Japanese military attaché Onodera, from whence it was forwarded by a certain Polish intelligence liaison officer called Peter to the center of the Polish resistance movement in Stockholm. However, despite attempted investigations, the Germans never succeeded in finding out any details about this resistance center or about the subsequent uses to which this material was put. In Rome, the intelligence material was passed to the Jesuit general Ledowski, and at the time it was assumed that it was required for the Vatican Intelligence Service, but here again nothing definite was established. And here's another book, also by Reinhard Dories, called Hitler's Intelligence Chief, Walter Schellenberg. It says, Besides the Poles in Germany, in Sweden, and the Japanese, there was a further, though slightly more unusual recipient of the information, these plans of the invasion, namely the Jesuit general Władimir Ledachowski in Rome.